Hello everyone, welcome back to Power for Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, we're back with part 2 of our set review for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle set. How are you doing this week? You well?
Yeah, we sure are. We have many more turtles to talk about. Actually, 2 more, really, because there's only 4 turtles. But there's lots of versions of them, so we're keeping going.
There's many versions of all the turtles. But yes, all good. Yeah, as I mentioned, so this is part 2 of our Cube set review for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle set. Last week, we covered white, blue, and black. This week, the plan is to cover red, green, multicolored, and some artifacts. Timecodes will be down below if you want to jump around directly to certain colours. Also, down below will be a link to the video version if you're listening to this. And also down below, there will be a link to a card gallery where we will read out every card we talk about, but if we mention other cards, we will try and reference them where possible. But if not, you can follow along there at your pleasure and see some nice, shiny pictures. Right, preamble done. James, do you want to take it away with our first card of the day? Talk to me about Cool But Rude.
Yeah, for sure. So Cool But Rude is a enchantment class, which is cool. I think we first saw classes in maybe the D&D set. But classes are cool. Classes are back. So this is 1 red for an enchantment class. So the way classes work is there's various different levels. You started at level 1, and then you've got to pay more mana to unlock for subsequent levels. So level 1, which you get as soon as you play the card, is whenever you attack, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And you can pay a further 1 red to level it up to level 2. So when it's on level 2, you're getting the effect from level 1 plus the additional effect of level 2. The additional effect of level 2 is whenever you discard a card, this class deals 2 damage to each opponent. And then level 3 for another 1 red to unlock level 3. And then you get, when this class becomes level 3, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, shuffle, then discard a card at random. So a gamble effect. This card's pretty cool, I think, actually. We've spoken before about red discard matters being a aggressive archetype we quite like. It's a way for your aggro decks to be doing something in addition to just beating down with cheap creatures, right?
Yeah, something interesting. We like that.
Exactly. And this card, I think, kind of slaps if you're pretty all in on the discard matters thing. Like the first mode is fine. The first level is nice, but I think level 2 is really where the money is here. 2 damage per discard in the right deck will kill them really quickly. Your Bazaar of Baghdad just deals 6 every time. That's pretty great. And obviously you're getting an extra discard when you attack as well from your level 1. You're going to have a bunch more effects that make you discard in this sort of deck. That's really powerful when it works. Plus getting the gamble on level 3 is really nice, right? These decks often just want to put cards in their graveyard, so you can set up the gamble in a way where it's just an entomb, right? If you don't have any other cards in your hand, or it's an entomb which gives you a discard trigger and deals 2 damage to them, which is cool. Plus, maybe you set up, get a madness card, something like that. That can be quite nice. So I think this card's really quite powerful, actually. Just you need to be pretty committed to the discard matters madness thing. So it's not going to be one for every cube, probably not one for most cubes. But if you are really leaning into this archetype, I think it is like, I don't want to say an auto include, but it's very powerful if you're doing red discard matters as an archetype.
Yeah, I'm quite high on this card. I'm high on this card in the right cube. Again, yeah. I don't think, as James mentioned, this kind of gets into high-powered level cubes because it does have the like how we discussed with Ninja Teen in the last episode. It doesn't. I think it's really cool and I like it, but it does nothing by itself. It needs other bits to come together to work. And yeah, there are some other places that I could see this getting played. In kind of more mid-rangey cubes, like there is like discard matters as an archetype, like not specifically just like the mono red version, but like or even madness and mayhem. There is like decks that kind of revolve around cards like Drake Haven. That's a really cool enchantment that when you discard a card, you can pay 1 to make a 2/2 Drake. and this is almost like another payoff for that deck. The other place I could see this being run is that effectively this is also a cycling payoff. When you cycle a card, you are discarding it. So this will trigger it even though it's not a... This card doesn't say the word cycling anywhere on it, but it could go in a cycling deck as a reward for turning your cycling into damage, which is quite nice.
That's pretty cool. I hadn't thought of that as an application, actually. 2 damage per cycle is kind of exactly what that deck wants, right? Seems pretty good.
Yeah. And it's slightly more fun than like Zenith Flare from Ikoria, which is just like you deal a lot of damage depending on how much you've cycled so far. But yeah, this is more kind of like it's doing a bunch of stuff while also rewarding you for doing that.
Yeah, seems powerful.
There is one last place. I want to get your thoughts on this, James. How do you feel about this as a bad Shieldred? Because it is specifically, it's whenever you discard a card, which is obviously much worse than a Shieldred because that's whenever they draw a card. So if you're wheeling with this, you would only, at the first time, deal damage equal to the amount of cards you're discarding. But then if you do level it up and get the second wheel, at that point you will have 6 cards in hands because you've cast the wheel. You're then dealing 12. Like, do you think this can get there in like a lower this is not Shieldred. I'm putting that caveat out there first. But like in a cube that's supporting the wheels deck potentially, could this be a payoff for it there?
I was really curious about where you were going with that. I was just reading about like this. No part of this is Shieldred. So if we're discarding a lot of cards to Wheel of Fortune, so the issue is right that generally the way you want to play your wheels is you play out a lot of cards first, and you're not actually discarding that many cards. Like you're hopefully discarding a lot fewer cards than you're drawing, right? Like. Sure, you could try and set it up so that you do it in a way that's lethal, but then you're just keeping a bunch of cards in your hand while you set this up to wheel. So it seems kind of tough. The thing about getting the second wheel, right, is after a Wheel of Fortune, what's for wheel? Because the blue ones don't work, right? Like Time Twister, Echo of Eons, you shuffle your hand in, right? It doesn't work. Echo's kind of cool in that you can gamble for it and then cast it from your graveyard. But yeah, they don't trigger the discard thing. So it's kind of just Wheel of Fortune, which is a bit tough.
There is the next card we're going to talk about.
To give you a preview of my opinions on the next card we're going to talk about, I don't think that's going to get there necessarily.
Okay, that's fair. So yeah, so cool, but like cool but rude. I think has some cool places it can get there. Maybe not as a wheel card, but like the other places we are a bit high on it. That does bring us nicely onto Raphael's Technique. This is 4 red for an instant. Each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards, but it also has Sneak for 2 and a red. Which, as a reminder, we saw this last episode, but we'll go over it again. You may cast this spell for 2 and a red if you also return an unblocked attacker you control to hand during the declare blocker step. So it's kind of like ninjutsu, but you have to do it in the block step, basically, if you have a creature that's not blocked. So I think me and James are both quite high on wheel effects. Wheel effects in general. The strength of this one we will discuss now. I like them because they are just really good in many decks that aren't just wheel decks. This being an instant is very cool if you ignore the sneak part. Really late game, being able to interact with your opponent by drawing 7 cards out of nowhere is quite nice. They won't see that coming. The sneak part is also quite interesting. Like in red, being able to reset some ETBs. In general, this is going to be something we consider with any red card with sneak. Red does have some good ones, like some Flame Tongue Kabu effects, like things like Fury. Those are very solid effects for us to reset and get the ETB again. We like that. Importantly, with this card, and I'm assuming this is one of the main reasons why James is not super high on it, is that, importantly, it is not a forced wheel effect. Your opponent doesn't have to draw the 7 cards or they don't have to discard their hand if they like their hand, and they don't have to draw the 7 cards if you have that Shieldred out. So from a power level point of view, it is not as good as Wheel of Fortune. Shocking. There is something to be said about them not, like, if you have the Shieldred out, yes, this won't deal them the damage, but them not being able to draw 7 cards is a real, like, it's not nothing, basically, but it's not as broken as 14ing them out of nowhere. Where I like this is in decks that we previously mentioned, like the Madness Mayhem deck, decks that I wanted to discard cards for value. Wheel of Fortune is quite strong. Again, if you've dumped out your hand and want to refill it, like there is a world where just in an aggro deck, once you've emptied your hand of your burn and your creatures, I know that's not really where that deck is nowadays, but just you empty your hand of your lightning bolt, you cast this, you draw a bunch more, and then you burn them out again. That's quite good. And then lastly, I have been running Sail into the West in my cubes recently as a additional wheel effect for like the the Dream Halls deck, and that is a Simic instant that effectively roundabout does the same thing. It's a optional discard your hand, draw 7 cards style effect. This one, I could see testing this over that. So the Dream Halls deck is more like, it does want to be multiple colors, but it is more blue-red at its core. So I could see this getting in there. Wheels are cool, but this is not the strongest, I think, is my TLDR. But James, what do you think of Raphael's technique?
Yeah, so in principle, I'm really on board with the idea of printing some slightly toned down wheels, because it's a cool, flexible effect which you kind of have to build around in ways that aren't super obvious all the time, and that's nice. And all the good wheels are like £1 million, so it's cool if they print some like slightly toned down ones. This I think is a little bit too weak though. 6 mana is I think is just too much. Like Sail into the West, a great example to bring up. Like that's 4 mana. It does basically the same thing. Instant speed is really powerful on a wheel because you get to do it in your opponent's end step and then you're the one using the cards first, right? That's really, really good. But Sail into the West gives you that at 4/6. For me, is just too much. It does have the sneak mode, but I'm just really dubious about like what deck wants a wheel and is going to be good at enabling sneak reliably, is my concern. I don't tend to like wheels in just straight up aggressive decks. Sure, you will have creatures in some of your decks that want wheels, but when you're hitting them for 6 with your Fury, it's probably a game you're already pretty far ahead in. I don't value super highly getting the discount then. You don't tend to have tons of like cheap evasive creatures in these decks, which is really what you need to enable sneak, right? So I'm pretty skeptical. I wish they'd made it just a little bit better, like was this really too good if you made it 5 mana, Like 6 just seems too much. Like you can get a time spiral for 6,
Yeah, I'd agree. If I'm honest, I think if you have a budget cube and you don't really have any wheels yet, I would personally just run this card, give it a go. I think wheels are cool because they open up new possibilities for decks. Like they just kind of, by putting in some wheels, you just kind of like let you open up the ability for people to do broken things. And we're recording this 3 days after pre-release, and this is less in euros. This is 2 cents, James. In dollars, it's less than $1. Like, if you had a budget cube, would you be tempted by this card just as we get a wheel now?
My initial reaction is, I've just looked it up. I think I would stretch to the 28 cents for Sail into the West, personally.
But you could have 2.
You could have 2. No. But if it's like budget cube, you want another wheel. Maybe you want a wheel in red specifically. Like, this is a fine way to do it, right? But it is for that pretty low powered level of cube, I think. If you've got access to other wheels, then this is not a good one. I'd even consider something like Magus of the Wheel, might be similar power level to this card. I have no idea if that card's expensive or not.
It's going to be cheaper than Wheel of Fortune, I can tell you that much. It is about £1, about $1. You can probably get one for. So
yeah. And that card is also quite bad, to be clear, but it's...
Here's a 3 mana 3/3. Yeah, we'll get there eventually.
Nothing wrong with a good, healthy centaur courser.
Yeah. I think we both like wheels, but yeah, it's just this one could have been pushed a little bit more. The next one, our first turtle of the day, I quite like, actually. James, talk to us about Raphael the Night Watcher.
Yeah, this one's got some potential, I think. So this is 2 red for a 2/3 legendary creature, mutant ninja turtle. It has sneak for 1 red. So sneak being the sort of updated version of ninjutsu. Basically, it's ninjutsu. You can cast this spell for its sneak cost if you also return unblocked attacker you control to its hand during the declare blockers step. So basically ninjutsu, but you're putting this spell on the stack. And this one says, attacking creatures you control have double strike. This is a pretty powerful card. It's pretty similar to Blade Historian as a card we've seen in the past. That was like 4 Boros hybrid mana for a 2/3 attacking creatures you control have double strike.
I remember that card, yeah.
Yeah. And that card like saw some play in some mid-power level cubes, and this is mostly better. Sneak will lead to some really nice blowouts, like especially if, game 1 your opponent doesn't know you have this, and they're not thinking about it during blocks. This can just like end the game, right? Like this can just be I win 3 combats and deal you 4 damage, and then the game's kind of over. If they do know it's in your deck, they can block in ways that play around this pretty nicely a lot of the time. But, double strike's a powerful ability, and it also is fine to just cast this, right? You can just cast this pre-combat Rumble, yeah.
This can just be your 4-drop.
And honestly, you should probably, if you're not guaranteed to be able to sneak it, depending on how they block, you will often just want to cast it pre-combat. I wouldn't get hung up on going for that blowout with the sneak ability. It is worth bearing in mind, as with a lot of these sort of Lords type effects, though, be aware when you're making your attacks if your opponent might be able to kill this in combat, because it can also lose you the game really quickly if you make a bunch of attacks assuming this is going to still be in play. They kill it, your attacking creatures no longer have double strike, and all of a sudden your attacks look horrible.
Yeah, this is a card to make good attacks fantastic, not a card to make bad attacks passable, I think is a...
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. This is a pretty strong card. I don't think we're putting it in powered cube just because the bar is so high for 4-drops. But I think most cubes below that, this is going to do some work. Certainly if you're running Blade Historian, I would consider cutting it for this card. I guess unless you see Blade Historian mostly as a white card, but it's not like you can put that in a 2-color white deck that isn't Boros anyway. So I think this is mostly just stronger.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I quite like this card. For me, the thing I actually like about it is, go with me on this, James. This kind of feels a little bit like Settle the Wreckage, in that it's a card that if you know it's in the cube, will have people playing around it to an extent. And that kind of additional play pattern, an additional kind of level of gamesmanship, I quite like. And it's really one that kind of rewards play groups that know each other. It's did I see the Settle the Wreckage in the draft? Therefore, do I need to worry about it? Did I see the Raphael the Night Watcher in the draft? I'm against the red aggro player. Do I need to worry about it? Is it okay? And that kind of element of, that additional level of magic, I'm quite a fan of. And just sneak cards existing, and I think this is one of the better examples of a sneak card that could end the game out of nowhere. I think it just being in a cube will make a cube more interesting, and I think that's something that I'm quite here for.
Yes, I mean, if you're thinking about what's the worst thing that could happen during your blocks, this will sometimes be the answer. It can be pretty savage, I think. Also worth noting, it's not other attacking creatures you control. It does have double strike itself, so you sneak this in, it's unblocked, so you are getting in for 4 by yourself, which is quite nice.
Yeah. Just as an aggro creature, this is fine, but it's the very high potential of this card that I'm kind of here for.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, but let's keep it going. Next up, we have Ravenous Robots. This is a 1 and a red for a 2/1 artifact creature robot with whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless robot artifact creature token. It also has the activated ability, pay a red and tap it. For creature tokens you control, gain haste until end of turn. So in the Go Wide Artifacts deck, we run plenty of effects that make us artifacts when we do something. This only triggering off of artifact spells means it's probably going to be worse than something like Third Path Iconoclast or the 3-mana Uncommon Saheeli, because they trigger off of non-creature spells, which will just end up being more of the deck that is generally running this. In the red-black version specifically, that's a bit more aggressive than the blue-red version. I think this is better. Like in the Rakdos version of Artifact Aggro that runs kind of cards like Arcbound Ravager, like the Arcbound Ravager, I'm playing a bunch of creatures, I'm killing you with Artifact Synergy style of deck. I think this is okay. The tokens gaining haste part is nice, like attacking with our Construct token the turn it comes out is pretty good. Having to pay a coloured mana specifically for it and tapping this creature as well is a bit of a drawback. There is probably a home for this. Like there is so many of these effects that kind of reward us for just playing other artifacts that kind of like, we could just be in a world where we just run all of them, and then that's the way we make a bunch of artifacts, and it's quite synergistic and quite good. And then we just feed them to an Arcbound Ravager and go to ham on our opponent's life totals. I think that's probably a fine way of doing it. Like, there is probably a home for this, and it's not going to be high-powered cubes, if I'm honest. Like we mentioned last episode, the Go Wide Artifact deck that isn't running Urza or Tolarian Academy. And like that's where I see this. This doesn't get into higher power level cubes where we have better options and more synergistic options and more reliable options. But as an aggressive piker that has a bit of extra synergy, I think this is a fine card in more budget cubes.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. We're getting a lot of these now, right? The dudes that make artifacts when you cast spells. There seems to be a good supply these days.
It's like, I think our next two cards are also in this vein of just slots that they tick off every set now, and just like something that makes a bunch of artifacts consistently is in that slot now.
Yeah, for sure. This one does have the upside over a lot of the others, though, that it is an artifact itself, which almost none of the others are, really, which is quite nice. So I agree that this probably isn't there for like super high power level cube. But that's, I think, is largely just because the artifact decks in those cubes tend to be more blue-based. They're sometimes red, but what they're really about is the big mana, like Tolarian Academy, Urza, Lord High Officer, that stuff, right? Because there are so many of these effects in blue, if your artifact archetype is really base blue, then it's like, well, why reach into red for this effect, Plus, yeah, it's, in those decks, triggering off non-creatures is certainly better than triggering off artifacts, right? But I really like the idea of this if you're doing the artifact aggro deck. Like the deck you used to have in your cube, I think this would be really, really strong. The red-black artifact beatdown deck. Partly because that deck had loads of artifact creatures specifically. And so this may actually be better than triggering off non-creature spells in that deck, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, because I'm just looking at it like, what's my 1 to 2s was Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista. Okay, but we also have Eyeside Golem, Signal Pest, Arcbound Ravager, Cyberman Patrol, Patchwork Automaton, Phyrexian Revoker, Porcelain Legionnaire, Spellskite, Steel Overseer, and Sir Ginger. And that's before we get to the 3s that are also quite good. Like that's actually quite deep and would trigger quite a lot with this card, actually.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're going as deep as playing Eyeside Golem, like, get this guy in there,
It's the reason I still have bloody Snowlands in my cube, James. I think it's the one snow card in my cube.
Phenomenal work. Plus, like, you're just going to be making tokens, right? Like, in that beatdown version of the artifact deck, this tap ability, I think, is no joke, right? You're just going to be pumping out some tokens. Certainly if you're running like Urza Saga, this is pretty phenomenal, right? I think this does a lot for that deck. And that deck is more base red, right? So you want the mono red version of this effect, which there isn't really a great other mono red version, right? I think this has a lot going for it for that deck specifically.
No, that's cool. Actually, yeah, one card I did just mention there, which actually stands out quite a lot with this, is Steel Overseer, the 2 generic 1/1 that you can tap it to put a count on each artifact creature you control, like doubling up the power. Like if you make like 2 or 3 of these, like 1/1s, and then you double their power, that's quite a scary board state quite quickly, actually. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Marvelous. All right, James, we're on to green. Talk to us about Leatherhead Swamp Stalker.
Yeah, for sure. So Leatherhead is a 2 green for a 5/4 legendary creature crocodile mutant rogue. It has trample. So 4 mana, 5/4 trample, very solid start. Leatherhead enters with a hexproof counter on her. And whenever Leatherhead deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a counter from her. When you do, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. I think this card's pretty interesting. So we're generally not super high on 4 mana creatures that don't have an ETB or haste, right? But a lot of the reason for that is that they just trade very poorly against removal, and this obviously doesn't have that problem, right? It comes in with that hexproof counter. So that does negate a lot of that risk. And 4 mana 5/4 tech trample hexproof is like, I mean, you wouldn't play that on its own, but it's already not terrible, right? And the ability to remove a problematic artifact or enchantment will come up and be really powerful. Like, I would not be thinking about this as like reliable artifact removal, right? You're taking on, you've got it's wait a turn to attack. They've got to not have good blocks for this. Although, you do trample over, so even if it trades, you can kill something. But that's actually not true. Interesting. So if it trades in combat, you can't remove the counter, right? So it does have to survive combat for you to get that disenchant.
Yeah, because it will be dead by the time you get the option to remove.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly not like reliable artifact or enchantment destruction. I wouldn't be, thinking, we don't need Reclamation Sage anymore. We've got this. It's not the same thing. But it is really nice upside, right? And it will come up in a lot of games, I think. Also, it doesn't say remove the hexproof counter, right? It's remove any counter. So this, I think, actually plays pretty well in a +1/+1 counters archetype. Because loading up your counters on a hexproof dude is already pretty good. Certainly one with trample. The counters will get it through their blockers. It will trample over. And then you can just remove a +1/+1 counter to disenchant something, keep the hexproof going. That seems pretty nice to me. And like, it's not one you put in and it's a narrow archetype specific card for that deck, but it is just a decent amount better in that deck than in your average green beatdown deck. So I think that would kind of be a reason to include it in the cube as well if you're running that. Yeah, like, listen, the competition for green fours is pretty strong. I wouldn't, I don't think this is better than like an Ulamwald Oddity or something, but it is powerful. And if you want, if you're looking for a way to get a little bit more sort of enchantment removal or artifact removal into your cube, without, giving up the beatdowns, this is kind of a way to do that. Plays well with the counter stuff. It seems like a nice option to me.
Yeah, this is one of the slots that I was alluding to that we do tend to get in every set now. A 4 mana 5-powered creature with some kind of ability. Like I think. Yeah, I'm kind of on board with everything you said. I think this will, if you need this to be your Rec Sage, it will work like 75, 80% of the time. But the times it doesn't work, you will really feel it. Like, if it's their Tinker target that's just bigger, and this is how you were planning on removing it, then that kind of sucks.
Plus, it's like on a turn delay, right? Like, they Tinker for Bolas's Citadel, get stuck in a land, pass the turn. You'll really wish you were casting a Rec Sage, not casting this idiot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I do think there's room for it. Like oddly, I think this might actually be a card for cubes that have a higher level of artifacts or enchantments. Like if you're doing something like that in your cube. If your cube cares about artifacts more, this is more interesting than just another Rex Sage variant where it's just a green answer guaranteed. There is a bit more play in that back and forth nature of it having to connect there. I think oddly, that's where I could see this actually seeing more play.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you're doing the counters thing, right? And you have potential to be blowing up multiple artifacts or enchantments over a game, then it becomes pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also, it is a fine statted body. Like here's the thing of like when this probably gets rotated into the arena or Mitgo cube, it will do a fine job at killing people because it is a 5-power 4-drop. And it will come out when the next one comes, or it'll come out when the next one comes in, basically.
Yeah, I've never seen a card that's more asking to be in Modo Vintage Cube for exactly one iteration and then be cut for the next green 4-drop.
Oh, yes. All right, let's keep it going, though. Because next up, we have Michelangelo Improviser. It is 3 and a green for a 4/4 legendary creature, Mutant Ninja Turtle. It has, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may put a creature card and or a land from your hand onto the battlefield. But it also has Sneak for 2 green. So kind of like we've discussed, like the 4-drop beaters that we see get printed in most set, the creature that cheats something into play is also something they're printing a fair amount of recently. Like a lot of sets are having an effect like this. And the dream with this is obviously on turn 4, we swing with our 3-drop with a good ETB. They don't block, we sneak this in, and then we put an even bigger thing into play. The issue with that kind of line of play is that there are 2 things that have to go to plan. We have to connect, and we have to have something good to cheat into play. That's better than the 4 mana we spent to sneak this in. That does get a lot easier in cubes that have creature tutors, because you can more likely to guarantee, like the old school green ramp decks that ran a bunch of tutors and was quite good at putting things into our hand. If we can do that and tee this up a bit, then it becomes a bit nicer. Also, the ability to put a land into play means you're less likely to whiff. So, like baseline. So and the floor on this is not terrible. The floor on this is it's a 4 mana 4/4 they have to really block. And if they don't, the worst case scenario is we put a land into play. That's not terrible as a floor for a creature. And obviously it then has the upside of it can put our Ulamog or something big nasty into play. And the fact that floor is kind of okay means I think I like this more than a card like Elvish Piper or maybe even Monster Manual. Those are effects that go into a deck only to cheat something from your hand into play. Those are more like 2-card combos. You need the cheat effect and you need the target in hand, otherwise neither really does anything. Whereas like with this card, I feel it's like a worse version of both sides because this has to connect. It doesn't have evasion itself. But if you cast it, it is just a 4/4, which is not which will affect the board and do more in a wide variety of cubes than an Elvish Piper or a Monster Manual on their own. Like there are plenty of cubes running a kind of green cheaty deck, and this will not be one that's reanimating an Archon of Cruelty in the first 3 turns of the game. This is a cube that, if we're playing this is a cube where it's fine to play a 4-drop that if it connects, we put in something like a Golter, like some other big dumb idiot with Trample. I don't see this getting into cubes with like the most broken ETB style creatures or things like Grizzlebrand. This is for like I'm attacking with my 4/4 to cheat in my 8-powered green worm. Like I think that's probably where I see this seeing more play.
Yeah, I'm normally pretty here for new ways to cheat big creatures in, but I'm a little bit suspicious of this one. Mostly just because I think green is a really not the best home for sneak cards in general. Like generally in your green decks, the creatures you're connecting with, right? You don't have cheap evasive creatures that get through, right? Your cheap creatures don't attack. Your cheap creatures set up your expensive creatures to attack. And generally, when you're connecting with your green dudes, they're like pretty beefy, and you just want to hit them with them. You don't want to return them to your hand for some value, right? So I think the sneak ability in general isn't super synergistic with the with what green is about in most cubes. And then So on top of that, so you could just not use the sneak ability, right? You could just cast this on turn 4 and try and attack with it. But it doesn't have any sort of evasion. And it's going to be so unreliable that you get to connect with it. You know, you say it could put an Ulamog into play, but the thing is, to want to include Ulamog in your deck, you have to have enough reliable ways to put it onto the battlefield, right? And I don't really think this counts. I don't think this is connecting enough of the time that you that it actually like justifies putting the really big stuff into your deck. So I think really how this is going to play out is that the ceiling is like maybe it puts in your 5 or 6 drop, which you could have cast in a couple of turns, you know. And like not that that's bad, you know, like saving on mana, accelerating out, that is good, but I don't think it justifies running this over, you know, a better 4-mana creature. In my opinion, if you want to do the cheaty thing in green, you've got to look for something a bit more reliable, like Monster Manual. Like, yeah, it's a bit slow, but it's hard. It's hard for them to kill, and it doesn't require it doesn't require the combat step, right? Blockers cannot interact with it. Even I'm not convinced this is better than Elvish Piper, actually, and Elvish Piper sucks. So, and they printed a bunch of better versions of Elvish Piper really recently, right? So I'd just maybe run one of those, maybe live a little and run a Eureka. You know, I'm not saying it always pans out amazingly, but you sure put the big thing into play. Yeah, I'm just concerned this is not going to not work out too much of a time.
Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah, it falls. It's not great at being a cheat effect, and it's not great at being a 4-drop, which probably means which means it's probably not a great card, which is probably where we are with it. So yeah, I do. Yeah, I can see that. I think that's fair.
I would like it a lot more if they at least gave it trample, you know, because then you can. The fact they can just trump block it and you don't get a trigger is a bit tough, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah. They are really trying to get you to sneak it in, but I guess, yeah, you are correct in what you said of like, what are we attacking with? Birds of Paradise. Like, how is this not getting blocked?
Birds is honestly the only good one. That's a good point. Yeah, maybe we just need them to print more birds and we'll be that.
No, but like the one time they don't block that Eternal Witness and you get the value again, James. Oh, you are gaming, but yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. All right, James, we have another Michelangelo. What do you think of Michelangelo Weirdness to 11?
Yeah, this one's pretty good, actually, I think. So Michelangelo Weirdness to 11 is a quite grating name to say, actually. Yes. But as a magic card, it is 1 green for a 1/1 legendary creature, a mutant ninja turtle, of course. And when Michelangelo enters, you create a mutagen token. So I think that's the first time we've met mutagen tokens. They're artifacts with 1 and tap, sacrifice this token, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, this is, you know, they introduce these new artifact tokens that you sack for a bit of upside pretty frequently now. This is most recent iteration. It's fine. It does what it says on the tin. It's pretty simple. No problem with it at all. So Michelangelo, 2 mana 1/1, create a mutagen token, and if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So it's a hardened scales as well. It's also very difficult text to read, but you all know what it does. Yeah,
I hate that text. There was a card that did it in the last episode, and I edited myself out, but like it took me like 4 takes. I hate the +1/+1 or +1. Yeah, I'm not even gonna.
Yeah, you just have to say +1 3 times in a row and act like that makes sense. But it's a hardened scales. You all know what hardened scales does, maybe. Yeah, this is really good, actually. I think for the counters deck. I think I've said before this podcast, I don't think hardened scales is actually good in the counters deck because you need all your cards to either be creatures you can put counters on or stuff that puts counters on creatures. And this is a creature. It does put counters on stuff, and you get the hardened scales effect on it. That's great. That's all the boxes you want. We already have Conclave Mentor that does a similar thing, but that is a gold card. It comes in as a 2/2, so it's a little bit bigger, without you having to pay that mana, but for track your Mutagen token. But first off, having redundancy is great. Secondly, it might actually be better to be a 1/1 and get the Mutagen token, I think, because even if you just put the counter on this, it's going to be a 3/3 because it has the Hardened Scales effect. Plus, you're going to have other things that trigger off counters. Yeah, I really like this card for the counters deck, but obviously you've got to be fairly committed to that deck. If you're just going to crack the Mutant token, put the counter on this, and not get many other counters over the course of a game, this kind of works out as 3 mana for 3/3 worth of stats, and that's not good enough. But yeah, I like it if you're committed to doing the thing.
If you're doing the counters deck, or if you have any way of just getting advantage of this, yeah. I think effectively this is a card for a Selesnya based deck. Like yes, it will work in green with things like Bristly Bill and Scythecat Cub, but kind of like realistically, this is a card that wants the consistent ones from white. The cards that like Agent Bishop Man in Black we talked about last week, a card that's consistently putting counters on a creature every turn, goes really hard with effects that double them. Yeah, I think this is going to be great for Selesnya. Yeah, very solid card. I'm kind of okay with Mutagen tokens. I think it's I think as a whole they're going to be a nice addition. I like the fact that it doesn't feel tied. Like it's flavorful, I guess, to Ninja Turtles because that's how they are made in the first place. From my brief knowledge of Ninja Turtles, but Mutagen as a word in Magic does feel like it could work in Simic. Like if we saw that on Ravnica, I think it would be okay.
Yeah, that would totally check out. It's and I think mostly these the shift towards having more like little artifact tokens that give you a marginal effects is played pretty well because they do just have some amount of cross synergies with decks that care about artifacts, etc., etc. So yeah, I'm here for Mutagen tokens.
All right, let's take it over to multicolor now, and we're starting with Toka and Razar Terrible Twos. It is a hybrid Rakdos for a 3/2 legendary creature, Turtle Wolf Mutant. It has this spell can't be countered, it has Menace, and it has whenever a player casts a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, Toka and Razar deals 3 damage to that player. So I think I know how this card works. If you hear James talking out of nowhere, it's because I got it wrong and I've cut him in. But let's give this a go. So I think this is a decent aggressive card just off the bat. Above rate aggressive creature with Menace that can't be countered is always nice. The mana pips is the drawback of this card, basically. It's easily doable in Rakdos, trickier in a mono red deck. You're probably not going to be able to do it in a Boros deck. Like, it's trickier there if you're not base one of the colors. Like, it's fine in mono black, it's fine in mono red. It's easiest to cast in a Rakdos deck. To me, like, if this gets into cube, I see this as it's getting into powered cube. It's in a cube that's running a lot of powerful cards with alternate casting costs or ways of reducing those costs. So, like, pitch elementals like Grief and Fury, like cards with Delve like Treasure Cruise, cards with Phyrexian Mana like Dismember, or like effects like Affinity, like cards like Thought Monitor, or effects that make spells either free or cheap to cast, like things like Dream Halls. That's a powered cube. That's where those effects generally see play. In those type of cubes, I feel that this is like a modern version of a card like Eidolon of the Great Rebels. That's red for a 2/2 that whenever a player casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, it deals 2 damage to them. The Eidolon has been generally crept out of more powerful cubes. This having an extra power and menace is a nice addition. It means as a base level, it could actually just get in as a solid, generically good aggressive card. Because what this effectively will do is, like, where Eidolon had a place is that it was in the burn version of red, and it was just it's there to just deal an amount of damage. You don't care about the damage you're taking because all you want to do is deal 4 or 6 to your opponent over the course of the game, and you're good. In a powered cube, I don't think it's going to trigger as much as Eidolon, but the fact that it can just get in for damage as well as that means it's probably fine. If it doesn't get in, it's just generally because that's not what we're doing with red right now. Just it's like red is benefiting off of little like tokens and getting them thrown at people by a broadside bombardiers or a gut. That's where the power level of red is. It's not really in this type of card. But I do quite like it. Like, if you are supporting burn as your red strategy, then I think this is going to be fine. The issue is that, if you don't have the cards for this to take advantage of, like, there's kind of like a cutoff of like maybe this, if this card isn't powerful enough to get in the most powerful cubes, is it going to get in a cube that doesn't have pitch elementals, treasure cruise, dismember, that kind of stuff? Like, I think that's the tricky part of this card. Or that's the tricky point with this card, is kind of finding out where it's going to fit. What do you think about Tokka and Razor, James?
Yeah, I think I'm on a pretty similar page to you. 3-2 Menace is really nice aggressive stats that will just get in for damage. And obviously, the more hits you get in with this, the more relevant the ability becomes, right? If this hit for 6, then they have to take 3 to cast their pitch elemental. That it makes the 3 damage they took to cast their elemental much more impactful, right? But there's just going to be there's a lot of games where this ability won't matter, right? Where it doesn't put a trigger on the stack. And the big issue for me is the mana cost, because you're just not mono red that often, like straight mono red. I'm not interested in putting this in most Boros decks. Like red on turn 2 is just, you're just not going to have a managed race that achieves that consistently. And this falls off really quickly if you don't play it on turn 2, right? This just isn't going to be a good play on like turn 4. So essentially, you've kind of got to treat it as an actual Rakdos gold card. And
yeah,
I just think there are more exciting things you can be doing with your gold card slots, from this guy.
Yeah, there's more efficient cards in things like Fire Covenant or like Carnage Interpreter, or there's more synergistic cards that actually do something with an archetype. This falls short of neither, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It would be quite funny if you played this with like a Helm of Awakening that makes all the cards everything cost less, and then they just get lightning bolted off every spell. That would be pretty sick. But probably not very good.
No, James, that's going to be a miserable commander deck. This bugger's legendary, or these buggers are legendary.
Oh, that sounds really fun. I really want to do that now. I don't think it would be. I'd only get to play it once though, wouldn't I? So maybe it wouldn't be worth the effort in putting it together. But it does sound funny.
It is funny. Yeah. That's quite a nice interaction. All right, we're moving on to Selesnya, James. Talk to us about Mickey and Leo, Chaos and Order.
Yeah, for sure. So Mickey and Leo, this is 2 Selesnya hybrid mana. So you can play green, white, or green-white for a 2/2 legendary creature, Mutant Ninja Turtle. It says, whenever you put a counter on a creature you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Yeah, I like this. I think this is a good payoff for the Selesnya counters deck. As mentioned before, that deck really likes it when its payoffs are on cheap creatures, because you do just need to make sure your creature count stays really high in that deck. It doesn't go in any other archetypes, really, I don't think. Like, sure, you'll incidentally get some cards out of it. If you put it in a normal deck, you will get some counters. But to really justify including this, you need to be pretty heavily supporting that Selesnya +1/+1 counter theme. But that is a pretty common theme to have in your Selesnya color pair. So there is an obvious home for it. If you're leaning into that archetype in your cube, I think this is one to consider.
Yeah, I think it definitely goes in that deck. I think my one concern with it in that deck is do you think this could be a little 24th card in that it doesn't, it goes in a counters deck, but it's not a creature you want to really put counters on. It doesn't have like First Strike or Trample, and it's not actually something that's putting counters on something. Like I love drawing cards. I'm here for that. But is there a danger that this just isn't doing one of the things you want? It's just giving you value for it. And like in some cubes, we are here for that value. But in more aggressive, efficient ones, do we just want to play a creature that puts counters on something, or something like the Conclave Mentor that we mentioned previously?
So I get where you're coming from, but I sort of think that if we're getting a card from the counter, it's maybe okay that it didn't go on a creature with a keyword, that really maximizes it. Because, to a certain extent, just getting the power and toughness is can be a payoff in and of itself, right? Like, you get this big enough, it can attack. And if you're getting cards along the way, you will draw into more exciting creatures as places to put the counters, right? Honestly, you might sometimes just not want to put the counters on this because you're worried that this is the first creature they'll remove when they find a removal spell. But yeah, I sort of think that, would you rather put your counter on a creature with flying or lifelink or whatever that is better in combat, or would you rather put a counter on this and draw a card? I think a lot of the time you'd rather have the card, right?
That's right. Sorry, it does say on a creature. It doesn't have to go on this.
Yeah. I'm just saying that when you said this isn't a creature that's super exciting to put counters on, I think that is mitigated to a certain extent by just getting those cards.
Okay, fair. Yeah. It is nice to see that this set has given a bunch of stuff for Selesnya. We were kind of, when we did our recent episode on things Selesnya can do, it was with some of these spoilers in mind, and I think there's been a bunch of cool cards from this set that do kind of go into that archetype quite nicely. And yeah, it did. And yeah, if this finds a home there as well, then awesome. And yeah, I'm here for it. All right, let's talk about our last gold card. Next up, we have Bebop and Rocksteady. This is one hybrid Golgari for a 7/5 legendary creature, Boar Rhino Mutant. It has, whenever it attacks or blocks, sacrifice a permanent unless you discard a card. So, firstly, this is not a card for every cube. As a beta, we can do better for the mana. Like, this is worse than a card like Rotting Regisaur. That's easier to cast, it's just one black pip. It's a 7/6, so it's bigger, and the downside is it's just an upkeep. We discard a card. There's no drawback of having to sack a permanent if we don't have a card to discard. So, base level, I just named a card that's better than this. Why are we interested in this? And that's because I'm looking for multiples of these effects. There's an archetype I've been kind of mucking around with in some of my lower powered level cubes that I think is really cool, and that's Power Matters. Like, it kind of stems from, I built myself a Yargle and Multani deck in Commander about a year or two ago, and I really enjoyed it. And there's just about enough stuff to make it work in cubes. Like, Yargle and Multani, I think, is like 6 mana for like an 18 something. Effectively, it's a deck where you just run cheap idiots with downsides with large amounts of power. Because there's some cool cards that reward you for having big, powerful cards in play. There's a card like Essence Harvest that's 2 and a black. Target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the highest power of creatures you control. Or a card like, or there's a bunch of cards like Rishkar's Expertise, things that let you draw cards equal to the highest power of creatures you control. There's a bunch of cool payoffs that are kind of that work very nicely with these kind of cards. So, and the issue with that deck is, it just needs redundancy. It just needs more versions of this effect. Like, it is that deck is in Golgari, so this fits in there perfectly. It is niche. It is not one for every cube. It's something that once I'm a bit more tried and tested on it, I will do an episode. I'll talk to James about doing an episode on it. And like, in that deck, I am not saying that this is even the best version. This is actually probably like the 3rd or 4th best version. But it just needs more 7 powered creatures for 3 mana, and this is another one. Like, it's 100% for slower cubes where you have the ability to do an engine and put some cool stuff together. I'm aware that it could also... there's a world where it should just have stayed in Commander. But I do think it's cool, and I do think there's something there, and this is kind of like the first chance I've actually got to talk about it. So, yeah, I think it could be cool. Outside of that, I don't think this card will see play, but let me know what you think, James.
Yeah, Power Matter sounds really cool. Yeah, I mean, this does a lot of the things that Rotting Regisaur does, right? It is worse if you're only ever, if you're always discarding the card. But it's nice this gives you the choice, right? You, if you have this later on, you can, and you want to keep your card in hand, you can just sack a land, you can sack a token that doesn't matter anymore. Plus, maybe this fits into some decks that like to sacrifice permanents, so it maybe has a little bit more range in terms of the decks it goes in than Rotting Regisaur, even though, yes, that lower toughness does matter a lot.
Ooh, Secret Aristocrat card.
Okay. Yeah, it could do some work there. But having said that, the difference between 5 and 6 toughness actually is really important because it makes this sort of a lot easier to double block, a lot easier to deal with in combat. Power Matter sounds really cool. Yeah, I wouldn't be just putting this in as like a generic beatdown E3 drop. Yes, it's a lot of stats, but you really have to be doing something to mitigate that downside.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. I do. I think there's something cool we can do with these cards, but it just needs a little bit more time in the oven.
Yeah, it sounds sick. I look forward to seeing it in a cube soon.
All right, but talking of big idiots, James, Jesus, this is a big lad. It's 2 big lads. Talk to us about Krang, Ultron Warlord.
Yeah, so Krang is 9 generic mana for a 9/9 legendary artifact creature Utrom robot.
So much beef on this card.
Yeah, so much beef. So many keywords as well. It has flying, trample, indestructible, and haste. And it says other artifact creatures you control have flying, trample, indestructible, and haste. Listen, that's a scary set of abilities. It's a scary amount of stats. But for 9 mana, you really need something more than just a big beater. Indestructible is nice, but honestly, I think people sort of overestimate in their mind how invulnerable Indestructible makes you from removal. Like, most cubes do just have a lot of bounce, a lot of exile removal. Those are going to be phenomenal against this card. But the biggest issue for me is that it's just not actually that good at stabilizing you. Like, generally, if you're putting a 9 mana creature into play, you've given up a lot to do that, right? In terms of the way your deck is built. Whether that be, cheating it into play with something like a Tinker or just trying to get to 9 mana and cast it. So it really needs to pull you back from behind. You need to sort of be thinking about it with the assumption that you're going to be behind on board when this hits the battlefield. And it's kind of just a big dude, right? Like, even if they gave it vigilance, I think that would be a really big upgrade, because I can just imagine a lot of scenarios where you play this and sure, it has haste and flying all these great keywords, but you actually just need to keep it back and block, because you're dying too quickly. So yeah, I think vigilance would have been pretty nice, but really, I'm looking for a bit more from a 9 mana card.
Yeah, I'd agree. It falls into the trap of it's like technically better than beating down your opponent than something like a Triplicate Titan, but it just doesn't go in other decks. Like, yes, if you reanimate this in, then you can beat your opponent with it, but like, it doesn't go in the Flash or Sneak Attack deck either, because it doesn't do stuff when it dies. Like, it actually just reminds me more of a card like Inkwell Leviathan, actually. That's like the very expensive. Is it 7 blue for like an Island Walk Shroud that like we powerful cubes have just moved past that. Like that is just a big thing that your opponent can't interact with. And in powered cube, they're probably playing blue anyway, so it just gets there and that kind of thing. But like, yeah, in most cubes, we are past the point of just playing big idiots. Like they need to do something else, and this is a very big idiot. But like, we're just not wanting those types of cards anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. It makes me a bit sad that Inkwell Leviathan isn't good anymore because I really liked that card. But you're absolutely right. That card is very washed, and this one doesn't have the impeccable vibes of Inkwell Leviathan, and also isn't very good. So really, not tons going for it in my mind. Although he does have a sort of little dude living in his stomach by the looks of it. So
that's Krang.
Maybe that's good for him. Is that Krang?
That's
I don't
Krang.
know.
Yeah, that's the Affinity
I'm not going to lie to you,
lad.
Dan. I have never seen any of these. I've not seen this show, so I could not tell you.
I have base knowledge. I haven't. It's one of those ones where
okay.
Both.
So the big robot lad is not Krang. Krang is the little the squishy guy in his stomach.
Yeah. I think Krang is the squishy guy in the stomach, but the big lad is a big lad. I think he is independent. I don't think it's. This is like how last episode where I said like it's also a Men in Black crossover. I'm just going to stop talking because I don't know.
Yeah. Please correct us with your turtle lore in the comments.
All right, let's keep it going. Next up, we have, I think, a card that's probably going to see a fair bit of play, and it is Skateboard. It is 1 generic mana for a artifact equipment. It has, when this equipment enters, tap target permanent. It has equip creature, gets +1/+0, and has haste, and has equip for a single mana. Yeah, I think this is going to see a fair bit of play. Like, cheap haste equipment does have this history of going into cubes in the past. Like, previously, it'd be a way of, like, basically, it's a way of getting our Grizzlebrand in for damage the turn it comes into play. That's where traditionally we saw these type of hasty cards get in. Then there was a period where that wasn't enough, and they kind of fell out of favor. What really got them back into favor was the printing of a card like Lava Spur Boots, which is effectively very similar to this card. Primarily because it comes down earlier than a card like Lightning Greaves, and effectively because it's 1 mana, same as this, you can find it with Urza's Saga. So that Urza's Saga interaction is definitely a nice extra level of play pattern. Like, if we're playing Urza's Saga, which of course we're playing Urza's Saga because we like artifacts, we need a target for it. Being able to attack with our Construct token straight away, we like that, it's good. But where Lava Spur Boots has kind of got a bit more traction over the last year, and again is a reason why it has seen play, is because it also interacts nicely with a card like Nardu. Nardu, the menace of many formats. I'm not going to read Nardu. But like with Saga and Nardu are probably the reason why this role has got more popular. And now with Skateboard, we have an additional version of that effect. And it ticks a lot of the same boxes. You can find it off of Urza's Saga. It triggers Nardu if you equip it, and then you can also give a beta haste with it. That's nice. Lava Spur Boots, the kind of trade-off is Lava Spur Boots gave the creature Ward 1, which is fine but not massive. It's annoying, but they will still pay the mana to kill your big thing. With this, we can now remove a blocker from combat by tapping down a creature when it enters, or if we are doing the Nardu thing, we can tap a creature that we control, and that will count as triggering Nardu. We don't actually have to pay the mana for it to kind of get the ball rolling. This is probably just going to be a straight swap for Lava Spur Boots in a lot of cubes. There isn't really the room for like 2 of these effects, if I'm honest. Maybe in a 720, then we might be getting 2 if we're doing both Nardu and Urza's Saga and we want a haste effect. So this, the ability to remove a blocker like and trigger on Nardu just seems like a an upside over Ward 1. The main drawback to this card is it's called Skateboard. Radical. James, thoughts on Skateboard?
Yeah, thoughts on the skateboard. I absolutely agree. This is, I think, just better than Boots, really. Especially if you're doing the saga sequence, right? That sequence of end of your turn, make a construct, untap, make a construct, get a skateboard, tap down your blocker, equip my construct has haste, I'm swinging for tons of damage just off my land. That's really powerful. But having said that, it's kind of a hard card to get excited about, right? It will see play in tons of queues because it's an upgrade on a existing card that sees play. But the upgrade isn't a super big one, right? It's mostly this does the same thing as Boots, but it has a little bit of upside. If you're going off power level, that is a swap you probably should make. But it's not a super high impact upgrade, They're mostly doing the same thing.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I guess it does come down to what flavor do you like in your Magic the Gathering set, Cowboys or Ninja Turtles? That's kind of where we are with it.
Yes, for sure. And pick your favorite.
All right, James, our last card of the day. Take it away with the Ooze.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So the Ooze is 2 generic mana for a legendary artifact. It says, whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it leaves the battlefield, create a mutagen token for each +1/+1 counter on it. So a mutagen token being that tap, pay 1, sack it, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, activate only as sorcery, and in addition to that, you can tap to exile a card from a graveyard and create a mutagen token. This is interesting. It puts a lot of game objects into play, which is something we like. If we're just here for having a lot of artifacts on the battlefield, this is going to achieve that pretty nicely. I'm sure there's some fair uses you can tell us about of the triggered ability where you get a mutation token when a creature of a +1/+1 counter on it dies. Maybe, something with an Arcbound Ravager could do some stuff. There is also some, interesting, if pretty niche combo potential here.
Is there? Oh, let's go. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, you just need... I was thinking about this on the walk home because I'm weird. But I think what you need, right, is there's a few creatures which already see a good amount of queued play, which will let the mutagen token come with a creature. So things like Stridehanger Automaton is a card we're both pretty high on. That's the 3 mana artifact creature. When you create an artifact token, you also get a 1/1 Thopter. Also, Chatterfang, the green squirrel dude. When you make tokens, you also get squirrels. So if you have one of those effects, plus you get a... then when you create your mutation token, you're going to get a 1/1 with it, right? You can then pay a mana, put the counter on the mutation token. And then if you have your sack outlet, you can... sack that and you get another mutation token, another 1/1. So in that whole loop, right, we're down 1 mana. So all we need is for our sack outlet to give us a mana, and then we're going infinite, right? So if it's something like, say, Phyrexian Altar or whatever, then we're mana neutral through that sequence. We're getting infinite ETBs, infinite death, but yada yada. If we have something like an Ashnod's Altar, where you can sack a creature to create 2 mana, then we're also getting infinite mana on the way through. Also works with something like KCI if it's the Strike Hammer Automaton, right? Because then the token we're getting is an artifact. It's a Thopter, so we're going +1 mana on each loop. So it's another infinite combo for your KCI, which is kind of cool. Listen, they're like 3-card combos. They don't just kill on the spot. Like, so this puts them in the, certainly not for high power level cubes, but I think it's interesting to have some combo stuff in low power level cubes too. And I'm not saying like you should go out there and put all these cards in your cube because they printed for use, but I think most of those cards are like exist in some cubes already, right? So if you're already running those cards, I think this is worth looking at.
No, that's really cool. That's a lot more better than the notes I had for this. Yeah. There being combo stuff with this, I do like, and that definitely makes it more interesting. Where I was coming at it more was just like if I'm honest, the fair use for this, because like there is room for incidental graveyard hating cubes if it's just not pure sideboard. Like we're not really running like most cubes don't have room for like Bajuka Bog or like the what's the is it Rest in Peace? Is that the one that just nerfs all graveyards off the board?
Yes, yeah.
Like we just don't really have the room for those in cubes. Recently, like I've enjoyed like a kind of like Unlicensed Hearse. There's kind of like it's a way of removing cards from a graveyard, but then it does something else as well. Unlicensed Hearse can become a beater, and the fair use of this is it's a sideboard card that any deck can run against the Reanimator graveyard value deck, but it can also get into those +1 on counter decks if you're running that as well. So that's kind of for me the fair use of this card is if you're doing the counter strategy and you're looking for a effect on an artifact that can go in any deck that can be a sideboard hate card for the if like Reanimator's too strong in your cube, something like that. But yeah, I do also see it in this will spit out a lot of artifacts in the right deck as well. And like this isn't the most Academy card, but with anything like this, it is worth mentioning just because lots of artifacts make lots of mana very easily. So yeah, cool card.
Yeah, for sure. I think when your sideboard cards have some outs to actually be played in the main deck and do something cool, that's a nice place to be, right? Like Agatha's Soul Cauldron is kind of a poster child for this, right? Like half the time it's played, it's just getting run out of a sideboard hate on a Reanimator deck, which is fine. But some of the time you have a Grist or a Loot or something with really powerful activated abilities, and you actually have a really cool build around, which is way better than just putting in a, Relic of Progentus or whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd agree with that. All right, that brings us to the end of the episode. Before we get you out of here, we're just going to have a quick chat on some of the cards that we're thinking of testing. I'll go first because I didn't write it in the show notes, so I want to give James a moment to prepare. I'll start with a card that I think we're both quite high on. Agent Bishop Man in Black is the card we discussed last week. The white creature that puts 2 counters on up to 2 target creatures. I think that one's just going to be pretty solid. It goes in, I don't want to say every cube, but if you saw it in any cube of a decent power level, I don't think you'd really bat an eyelid. The other ones for me that I'm quite hot on are like more for some of my more slower cubes. Like I quite like Ninja Teen from last week. That's the one that I have promised I will kill James with. I will find the cube environment. It's the class that is a bad Blood Artist, but then it can give your whole board Menace and then give your whole board Sneak as you level it up. I think that one's quite cool. And then, if I'm honest, from this week, yeah, like the counter stuff I think is fun, but I'm going to put Raphael the Night Watcher in a bunch of cubes because I think it's cool. The one that sneaks and gives attacking creatures you control double strike. I think that's just going to lead to cool stories, and story equity is important in cubes, and that's what I'm here for. James, how about yourself? Was there any other cards you wanted to touch on that kind of like you're thinking of testing in any of the cubes you have together?
Yeah, there's a bunch of pretty interesting cards in the set. I think probably the most powerful is the Super Shredder, the menace guy that gets bigger whenever any permanent leaves the battlefield. I think that card's very pushed. I think Cool But Rude is an interesting build around for the Discard Matters deck. The Ooze I would consider, because I do have a lot of those cards that I mentioned for combos in Dual Commander cubes. So
sick. Yeah.
I could look at that. The answer at the end of it is probably, for me personally, none of them. And it's not because they're not good cards or they're not interesting cards. Like, for me, this set, like, the art and the vibes are, like, not quite my thing. And, you know, building cubes is a reflection of partly cards you like and cards you want to play with, as well as just cards you think are good, right? And you know, not trying to like hate on, like, I hope lots of people do enjoy this set. For me, the cards don't like make me want to go out and buy them and put them in cubes particularly. So I'm probably skipping quite a lot of them that I might test otherwise. But, you know, again, that is just a me thing. And I think for a lot of people, there will be some really interesting cards in this set.
Yeah, definitely. I think that sentiment is reflected in some of the comments from our first episode on the YouTube version. Some people were saying similar things. I do see it. I don't disagree in terms of one of the best things about Cube is that we don't have to run all the cards. We can tailor it. And also, I do feel that they're kind of... there are some very cool cards in this set. So there's cool designs in this set. From a flavor point of view, again, that's entirely up to whoever's listening to make the decision if you like the flavor or you don't like the flavor, or if it doesn't matter. I think for me, there's enough cool cards that I kind of will test because I think they're cool. And I can kind of, from my end, I can kind of get over it. Or for me, it's not as much of a bigger drawback in some of my cubes. But what's nice, I will say, is that there's no one ring. It doesn't feel like there's like an Orcish Bowmaster that's going to be a slam dunk. Like you have to, like if you're building the most powerful cube, you have to run these cards. Everything we've touched on has been a conversation at least.
Yes, for sure. There's nothing like that. And like, you know, the other side of this is definitely that there'll be a bunch of people who want to try these cards because of the art and the vibes of the set. Like it's it goes both ways, right? But yeah, it's very much just something that like is a personal preference thing, you know. And I think we'll have opinions all across the scale on that.
No, completely agree. All right, that's going to do it for our episode, and that's going to bring an end to our set review. James, pleasure. Yeah. Cool cards and a good conversation, I think.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
I should have said radical cards. Is that what they say? It's been a hot minute.
Oh, yeah.
Radical cards, James.
If you say so, absolutely.
Oh, it's important to make yourself laugh. All right, that's going to do it for the episode. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, leave the podcast a 5-star review, give us a thumbs up. All that good stuff greatly helps us out. Until next week, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.